Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a close look at liraglutide. It's a really interesting drug involved in managing both weight and blood sugar.
Yeah, and with all the buzz around newer weight loss meds lately, it feels like a good time to explore one of the, well, foundational players in this space.
Yeah.
Understand its story.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a bit of material.
hmm Clinical reviews, scientific papers on its discovery, pharmacology.
How it's made, the regulatory side of things, even analyses looking at its economic and social effects. It's pretty comprehensive.
Definitely.
So our mission today is basically to unpack liraglutide. What is it? How does it actually work? How did we get from discovering the basic science to using it in clinics?
And what's the bigger picture? Its wider impact.
Right. Okay, let's get into it. Where do we start? The history, I suppose.
Yeah, I think to really grasp liraglutide, you have to go back, way back actually, to the discovery of incretins. Think 1902.
1902.
Yeah, Bayliss and Starling. They found this chemical substance from the intestine that could stimulate the pancreas. They didn't call it incretin yet, but that was the seed.
Okay, so that's the very beginning. And then things picked up later with specific hormones.
Right. Fast forward to the late 60s, and GIP, gastric inhibitory polypeptide, gets identified. That's one of the two big incretins we know.
But not the only one.
No, exactly. By the early 80s, researchers were pretty sure there was something else. Intestinal extracts still boosted insulin even when GIP was removed.
Ah, so the hunt was on for the other player.
Pretty much. And then in '83, Graham Bell in Chicago cloned the hamster preproglucagon gene. And inside that sequence,
Was GLP-1.
bingo. Well, the blueprint for GLP-1 and GLP-2, actually.
Got it. So the genetic code pointed the way, but which specific piece was the active hormone?
Well, initially, they thought it was a longer version, GLP-1 137. But then two groups, Joel Haidner in Boston and Jens Juul Holst in Copenhagen, figured out it gets processed.
Processed into shorter forms.
Yeah, into GLP-1 737 and GLP-1 736 amide. Those are the active ones, the ones that really trigger insulin release.
It's amazing how those little tweaks make all the difference biologically. Now, you mentioned something earlier about some mouse studies that were maybe a bit confusing.
Ah, yes, that's a good point. The GLP-1 receptor knockout mice. So mice engineered without the receptor.
You'd expect big problems with glucose and weight, right?
You would think.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, their phenotype, their observable traits, were relatively mild regarding glucose metabolism and body weight.
That's unexpected.
It really is. It just shows that sometimes you don't see the full picture until you study it in humans.
So those early human studies were really crucial then. What did they show?
Absolutely critical. In 1987, Cramen and his team showed definitively, yes, GLP-1 is an incretin in humans.
Okay, proof in people.
And then 92, Gutniak et al. Showed its potential against diabetes.
Yeah.
Not just type 2, but surprisingly, it showed some effect in type 1 as well. That was big.
That really set the stage, and these studies started revealing the key advantages we see today.
Exactly. Two major things stood out early on. First, the insulin secretion was glucose dependent.
Meaning it only kicks in when blood sugar is high.
Precisely, which means a much lower risk of hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar. That was a huge advantage over older drugs.
Makes sense. And the second thing,
The glucagonostatic effect. It suppresses glucagon.
glucagon tells the liver to make sugar, right?
Right. So by suppressing glucagon, it helps lower the liver's glucose production. So you get this dual benefit, more insulin when needed, less glucose production from the liver. Very promising for type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so we have the hormone, GLP-1, and we know it works well in humans. But the big problem was it disappears really fast in the body.
Vanishes. Native GLP-1 has a half-life of just a couple of minutes. Totally impractical as a drug you'd inject.
So how did they solve that? This is where liraglutide itself starts to emerge, right?
This is where the clever chemistry comes in. Around 2000, Knudsen and his team published work on designing GLP-1 derivatives that could last long enough for once-daily dosing.
And their trick was,
Fatty acid derivatization. Basically, attaching a fatty acid chain to the GLP-1 molecule.
okay, why do that?
That fatty acid acts like a handle, allowing the modified GLP-1 to bind to albumin.
Albumin, the main protein in blood plasma.
Exactly. By hitching a ride on albumin, the drug is shielded from the enzymes that normally chew up GLP-1 very quickly, and it gets filtered out by the kidneys much slower.
So it's like giving it a protected disguise and making it too big to get kicked out easily.
That's a great way to put it. And that study specifically mentioned the peptide that became liraglutide as a really promising candidate.
And they kept refining this idea.
Oh, yeah. A 2007 paper by Madsen's group dug deeper into the structure-activity relationship. They looked at how the length of the fatty acid chain and the spacer connecting it to the peptide.
How those details affected how well it worked and how long it lasted.
Exactly. It was all about finding the sweet spot, good binding to the GLP-1 receptor, but also strong enough, reversible binding to albumin for that long duration.
A real molecular balancing act.
It really was. And a 2005 paper, also involving Bier and Knudsen, really nailed down that reversible albumin binding as the key mechanism for extending the action. That paved the way for liraglutide.
Such a cool journey from basic physiology to drug design. Okay, so we have liraglutide. Let's shift to how it's actually used now. What are the main approved uses?
Right, so liraglutide, being a GLP-1 receptor agonist, has two main jobs, therapeutically speaking. First, improving glycemic control blood sugar in adults, and also kids, usually 10 or 12 and up, depending on the brand, with type 2 diabetes.
And that's always alongside lifestyle changes.
Always. Diet and exercise are fundamental. It's an adjunct therapy.
Okay, so that's role number one. Diabetes management, what's the second?
Chronic weight management. It's approved for adults who are overweight, so a BMI of 27 or more, with a weight-related health issue, like high blood pressure or cholesterol. Or adults with obesity, which is generally a BMI of 30 or more.
And for kids, too.
Yes. Also for adolescents, 12 to 17, who have obesity and weigh over 60 kilograms. And again, it's meant to be used with a reduced calorie diet and more physical activity.
It's interesting the BMI criteria differ slightly depending on comorbidities. Suggests the risk-benefit calculation changes.
It does. And, it's not the only drug option for weight management. In Canada, for instance, you also have orlistat and the naltrexone bupropion combo. Liraglutide is one tool in the toolbox.
Our clinical expert really stressed the need for a multi-component approach for obesity. Why is just diet and exercise often not enough long-term?
Well, lifestyle changes, diet, activity, behavioral strategies, they absolutely should be the first line. They can work. But the reality is, sustaining significant weight loss long-term with just lifestyle changes is incredibly difficult for many people.
The body fights back, right? Compensatory mechanisms kick in.
Precisely. Metabolism might slow down, hunger hormones can increase, so weight regain is very common, unfortunately.
And that's where medications like liraglutide can potentially help.
Yes, they can be a really valuable addition. They can help people achieve more weight loss initially, and maybe more importantly, help maintain it. Our expert noted that even losing 5 to 10 kilos, which might sound modest, can bring clinically meaningful improvements in things like cholesterol and blood pressure.
So if someone starts Saxenda, the weight management version, what's the dosing like? Is it straightforward?
It's a gradual process. You start low, typically 0.6 milligrams injected once a day.
Okay.
Then you increase the dose each week, usually by 0.6 milligrams over about 4 weeks, until you reach the target maintenance dose of 3 milligrams daily.
Why the slow ramp up?
Mainly to help manage side effects, particularly nausea, which can be common at the beginning. It gives the body time to adjust.
Makes sense. And is there a checkpoint, a time to see if it's actually working for that person?
Yes, there is. Generally, after someone's been on the full 3 milligram dose for 16 weeks, so about 4 months, you assess their weight loss.
And what's the benchmark?
If they haven't lost at least 4% of their initial body weight by that point, the guidelines suggest it's less likely they'll get a significant long-term benefit, and stopping the medication should be considered.
That's a useful, practical guideline for decision-making. What about using it in type 2 diabetes? Is it often combined with other meds?
Oh, absolutely. The big phase 3 trials showed it works well in combination with many standard diabetes drugs, metformin, sulfonylureas, TZDs, even basal insulin.
So it's quite versatile in fitting into different treatment regimens.
Very much so. It shows it can be useful at various stages of type 2 diabetes management.
And beyond just lowering blood sugar in those patients, did the trials show other benefits?
Yes, and this is quite important. In people with type 2 diabetes, liraglutide was also shown to help with weight reduction, lower systolic blood pressure, and there's even evidence suggesting it might improve the function of the pancreatic beta cells, the insulin producers.
Those are significant extra benefits, like pleiotropic effects.
Exactly. It adds to its value in managing such a complex disease.
I also recall something about prediabetes, preventing the progression.
Yes. An extension phase of one of the big studies, Study 1839, found that the 3 milligram dose of liraglutide was significantly better than placebo at delaying or even preventing the progression from prediabetes to full-blown type 2 diabetes.
That's potentially huge for early intervention.
It really is.
Yeah.
Suggests a role for people at high risk.
Our expert also mentioned using it around bariatric surgery.
Yeah, that was interesting. Apparently, it's sometimes used before surgery, but more often after, especially if someone starts regaining weight, which can happen. The 3 mg dose is used to help manage that post-surgical regain.
Underscores that weight management is often a long-term challenge, even after surgery. The expert also made a point about when to consider medication, not necessarily just as a last resort.
That's right. While lifestyle is the foundation, pharmacotherapy like liraglutide can be considered earlier, especially for people with higher BMIs or those who've tried lifestyle changes but haven't been able to sustain the loss.
Because of those compensatory mechanisms we talked about.
Exactly. The long-term data for just lifestyle interventions can be a bit discouraging because the body adapts. But, and this is crucial, liraglutide for weight management should always be combined with ongoing lifestyle efforts. They work together.
Makes sense. What about combining liraglutide with other weight loss drugs, like orlistat or naltrexone bupropion? Is that done?
Well, combination therapy is standard practice in things like type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure. But for weight loss, specifically combining liraglutide with those other drugs, there isn't a lot of strong evidence supporting it right now.
So not a routine thing, maybe more of an individual clinical decision?
Pretty much. Some doctors might try it based on the different ways the drugs work, but we need more research to really know if it's effective and safe routinely.
Okay. Let's dig into the clinical trial evidence a bit more, especially for weight loss. You mentioned some key studies.
Yes, the review highlighted 4 major phase 3 trials, Study 1839, 1922, 1923, and 3970. These were large, well-conducted studies.
What were the key features?
They were all randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-center, the gold standard, really. Involved over 5,000 adults in total, conducted internationally, including Canada.
And the main takeaway on weight loss?
Across the board, liraglutide 3 mg led to significantly greater weight loss than placebo. This held true whether people had diabetes or not, had prediabetes, or even obstructive sleep apnea.
And this was always compared against placebo plus lifestyle advice.
Yes, both groups got advice on diet and exercise, but the liraglutide group consistently lost more weight.
And we're talking clinically meaningful amounts, not just a kilo or two.
Definitely. The odds of achieving at least a 5% weight loss, and also more than 10% weight loss, were significantly higher with liraglutide compared to placebo.
Can you give an example? Like how much more weight loss?
Sure. In study 1839, after 56 weeks, the average weight loss in the liraglutide group was about 5.6 kilograms more than in the placebo group. So a noticeable difference.
How did it stack up against something like orlistat? Were there comparisons?
There weren't many direct head-to-head trials, but network meta-analyses, which kind of compare treatments indirectly using common comparators like placebo, suggested liraglutide 3 mg was better than orlistat for achieving that bigger target, like 10% weight loss.
Okay, so potentially more effective in those analyses.
Yes, greater weight loss over placebo compared to orlistat. However,
There's always a however.
right, those same analyses suggested people were more likely to stop liraglutide due to side effects compared to orlistat.
So a trade-off perhaps between efficacy and tolerability for some people.
It often is. Balancing how well it works with how well someone feels on it is key.
Did the trials look at quality of life? Did losing weight with liraglutide make people feel better in broader terms?
They did measure it using questionnaires like the IWQOL Lite, which is specific to weight's impact on life quality.
Yeah.
There were some improvements seen in the liraglutide groups, but honestly, the results were a bit mixed. Sometimes the differences weren't statistically significant after they adjusted for all the comparisons being made.
So not a clear home run on the quality of life measures.
Not consistently. Across all studies and all measures, no. Results from more general scales, like the SF-36, were also a bit inconsistent. It suggests weight loss and metabolic improvements don't automatically translate perfectly to these broader QL scores in trial settings.
Interesting. What about lipids? Cholesterol, triglycerides?
Yeah, they tracked those. There were some statistically significant changes, especially triglycerides tended to improve. But our clinical expert source felt the changes seen in LDL cholesterol specifically weren't really large enough to be considered clinically meaningful on their own.
Good point. Statistical significance versus clinical relevance. Now, we have to acknowledge the newer GLP-1 drugs, like semaglutide. How does liraglutide compare there?
Right, the landscape is evolving fast. There was a head-to-head trial comparing semaglutide 2.4 milligrams weekly to liraglutide 3 milligrams daily.
And the results?
Semaglutide came out significantly ahead on weight loss. Average was about 15.8% loss with semaglutide versus 6.4% with liraglutide at 68 weeks.
Wow, that's a substantial difference.
It is. Interestingly, the proportion reporting GI side effects was similar, but more people actually stopped taking liraglutide in that specific trial for various reasons.
Shows the progress being made in this drug class. You also mentioned an ICER report. What did they conclude about liraglutide's value?
ICER, the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, they do these assessments of clinical effectiveness and value. They compared Saxenda, liraglutide, to other obesity treatments, including the newer GLP-1s and older meds.
Aiming for a comparative picture of benefits and costs.
Exactly. Trying to provide context for decision-making about which treatments offer the best value for patients and the healthcare system.
Okay, that covers the clinical picture well. Let's switch gears to how it works, the mechanism of action. What's liraglutide actually doing in the body?
So at its core, it's a GLP-1 receptor agonist. It mimics the action of our natural GLP-1 hormone by binding to and activating the GLP-1 receptor.
And these receptors are found in various places.
Yes, key locations include the pancreas and the brain.
Let's start with the pancreas. What happens there?
Activating GLP-1 receptors on pancreatic beta cells stimulates them to release insulin. But as we mentioned, it's glucose dependent.
Only when sugar is high.
Right. So it helps lower blood sugar after meals, for instance, without driving it too low otherwise. It also suppresses glucagon release from alpha cells in the pancreas.
The double whammy for glucose control we talked about.
Exactly. Now in the brain.
This is for the weight effect.
Yes. GLP-1 receptors are present in brain regions that control appetite and satiety, that feeling of fullness.
So activating those receptors tells your brain you're full.
Essentially, yes. It promotes satiety, reduces hunger, and that leads to eating less, lower energy intake, and ultimately weight loss.
So pancreas for sugar, brain for weight. Are there other potential brain effects being explored?
There is ongoing research, yeah.
Yeah.
Looking into potential neuromodulatory roles. Could GLP-1 signaling affect things like neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, maybe mood disorders, addiction?
Wow, really broad potential.
It is, but still very much in the research phase for those areas.
Yeah.
Needs a lot more investigation.
What about the heart and blood vessels? I saw mentions of cardiovascular effects.
Yes, this is a really important area. GLP-1 receptors are found on heart cells, blood vessel walls, immune cells, even in the kidneys.
Suggesting multiple ways it could be protective.
Potentially, yes. The mechanisms aren't fully mapped out, but several things seem to happen.
Like what?
Improving endothelial function, the health of the blood vessel lining. It seems to boost nitric oxide, which helps vessels relax.
Better blood flow.
Right. And it might inhibit endothelin-1, which constricts vessels. There's also some animal data suggesting anti-atherogenic effects, maybe slowing down plaque buildup in arteries.
Does this translate clinically? We mentioned blood pressure and lipids earlier.
We do see those improvements in risk factors, lower systolic blood pressure, better triglycerides. There's also a theory it might help heart muscle cells use energy more efficiently.
But there was that point about heart rate.
Yes. One consistent finding is a small increase in resting heart rate in some patients. The clinical significance of that long-term is still debated and being studied.
So, a complex picture with effects across multiple systems. Let's talk about how the body handles the drug itself. Pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. How quickly is it absorbed?
After you inject it subcutaneously, it's absorbed pretty slowly. Peak levels in the blood usually occur between 8 and 12 hours later.
And that slow absorption is part of why it lasts long.
It contributes, yes. The bioavailability, how much actually gets into circulation, is estimated around 55%.
Is that slow absorption related to the drug structure?
Yes, partly. The liraglutide molecules can actually clump together, self-associate, at the injection site. These clumps then slowly break apart, releasing the drug gradually for absorption.
Interesting. Once it's in the blood, where does it go? Does it spread everywhere?
Not really. It binds very strongly to plasma proteins, mostly albumin over 98% bound.
Back to the albumin binding.
Exactly. And because it's so tightly bound, it mostly stays within the bloodstream. It doesn't distribute widely into other tissues.
Okay, so it circulates bound to albumin. How does the body get rid of it eventually?
It's broken down, metabolized, similarly to how the body breaks down large proteins. Enzymes like DBPIV and NEP are involved.
But slower than they break down natural GLP-1.
Much slower because of the modifications made to liraglutide. The breakdown products are only found in tiny amounts, and eventually it's completely degraded into amino acids.
So it's not mainly cleared by the kidneys or liver directly sending the whole drug out?
No, the main route is this metabolic degradation. Very little unchanged drug shows up in urine or feces. The clearance rate is low, and the elimination half-life is long, around 13 hours.
And that 13-hour half-life is what allows for the once-daily dosing.
Precisely. It sticks around long enough.
Understanding that PK/PPP profile is definitely key for using it effectively. Okay, let's shift to manufacturing. Making this stuff must be complicated.
It really is. Liraglutide is a fairly large peptide with that fatty acid chain attached. Acylated peptide synthesis is complex and generally expensive.
Requires specialized expertise.
Absolutely. Companies like Badgem, who are experts in peptide manufacturing, were key partners in figuring out how to produce it at scale. It highlights the role of these specialist CDMOs, contract development and manufacturing organizations.
So it's not like stamping out simple pills.
Not at all. They often use fragment-based approaches, making smaller pieces of the peptide separately, then carefully linking them together, and finally adding the fatty acid bit. Lots of precise steps and purification needed.
Sounds very high-tech. Fits with the broader trend of more complex biologic drugs. Now, the regulatory side, we know it's approved, but what was the journey like? Any bumps?
Well, it gained approvals, initially as Victoza for diabetes, then Saxenda for weight management, through the standard regulatory processes in the US, Europe, and elsewhere. A big recent development was the FDA approval of the first generic liraglutide injection in December 2024.
Generics usually mean better access and lower costs eventually.
Typically, yes. However, the journey wasn't entirely smooth. There was a significant legal settlement in 2017.
Right, you mentioned that. What was it about?
Novo Nordisk paid about $58.6 million to the U.S. government to settle allegations involving the False Claims Act and the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act.
What were they accused of?
The main issue was around compliance with the FDA-required REMS program, that's Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy for Victoza, between 2010 and 2014.
And the problem was?
The government alleged that the company's sales reps were trained to downplay or obscure the risk of medullary thyroid carcinoma, MTC, which is a serious potential risk noted in the boxed warning and REMS materials.
So basically allegations that the safety message wasn't being delivered properly to doctors.
That was the core allegation. Things like telling doctors the MTC risk was just in rodents or easily treatable, which allegedly misrepresented the FDA-approved warning.
That's serious. Did the settlement cover anything else?
Yes. It also resolved allegations of illegal off-label promotion marketing Victoza for uses it wasn't approved for at the time, like weight loss before Saxenda was approved, or for type 1 diabetes.
And Novo Nordisk's position.
They denied wrongdoing, but agreed to the settlement to resolve the matter. It definitely underscores how critical accurate risk communication is.
Absolutely. And it's approved in Europe, too.
Yes, the EMA approved Saxenda for weight management across Europe. Both Victoza and Saxenda are registered trademarks of Novo Nordisk.
Okay, let's talk economics. This drug has been around a while. It must have made a significant impact financially.
Oh, definitely. It's been a major product for Novo Nordisk. Market reports consistently show a large market for liraglutide and project continued growth for this whole class of drugs.
How is the market broken down?
You can look at it by brand Victoza versus Saxenda and by distribution channels like hospital pharmacies, retail, online pharmacies.
And how does liraglutide fit into the bigger picture of the pharma market, especially diabetes and obesity?
It's been a huge part of the massive growth in the GLP-1 agonist market overall. Some analysts compare the potential impact of these drugs on obesity to what statins did for heart disease.
A potential game changer.
That's the view. There's a strong belief that GLP-1s are becoming, and will continue to be, a major force in healthcare economics and treatment paradigms.
Fascinating how science translates to market forces. Lastly, let's touch on the cultural side. How are drugs like liraglutide influencing how we think about weight?
It's complicated, really. On one hand, having effective medical treatments could help shift the view of obesity away from being just a matter of willpower.
Towards seeing it more as a treatable medical condition.
Exactly. That could potentially reduce weight stigma, which is a huge problem.
But there's a potential downside.
Yes. Access is a big issue. These drugs are expensive, insurance coverage varies wildly, so there's a risk it could actually worsen stigma if only wealthier people can access them, creating a kind of bias against those who can't afford treatment.
A potential new layer of inequality.
Potentially. And there's also the idea mentioned in some sources that people using these drugs might face stigma for taking the easy way out, similar to negative attitudes sometimes seen towards bariatric surgery patients.
So we need to be really careful about access and messaging. Patient groups often report facing stigma already, right?
Absolutely. Significant social stigma exists. impacting everything from employment to healthcare interactions. People report feeling shamed by doctors, sometimes avoiding care altogether. There's still this pervasive misunderstanding of obesity as purely self-inflicted.
It's a really complex intersection of medicine and societal views. Okay, we've covered so much. Before we wrap up, let's quickly hit the key safety points for liraglutide.
Right. Most common side effects are GI issues. Nausea is very frequent, especially when starting or increasing the dose. Vomiting, diarrhea, constipation can also happen.
Those are the common ones. What about more serious potential risks?
Hypoglycemia, low blood sugar is a risk, but mainly when it's used with other drugs that also lower sugar, like sulfonylureas or insulin. Dose adjustments might be needed then.
Okay.
What else? That increase in resting heart rate we mentioned needs monitoring. There have been post-marketing reports of kidney problems, sometimes linked to dehydration from the GI side effects. And hypersensitivity reactions, though rare, can occur.
So monitoring is key, especially kidney function if someone has bad GI side effects.
Definitely. Patients need to know the signs of hypoglycemia too. And doctors need to be cautious with patients who already have kidney issues. All the details are in the official warnings.
What about the pancreatitis concerns that came up early with GLP-1 drugs?
That's a good point. There were initial concerns based on other drugs in the class, but specific, large animal safety studies on liraglutide in rats, mice, monkeys didn't find evidence of pancreatitis at clinically relevant doses. That was reassuring.
Good to know. Well, this has certainly been a comprehensive deep dive.
It really has. We've traced liraglutide from those early incretin discoveries all the way to its use today for diabetes and obesity. We've looked at how it works, how the body handles it, manufacturing, the regulatory path, economic impact.
And even how it intersects with cultural views on weight.
And it's clear that while it offers real benefits, there are important things to consider: side effects, access issues, societal perceptions.
Absolutely. Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over.
As these kinds of medications become more common, how is our whole approach to chronic conditions like obesity and type 2 diabetes going to change? What are the bigger societal questions we really need to grapple with?
A really important question. We hope this discussion gave you a solid foundation. We definitely encourage you to explore the sources and keep thinking about this intersection of science, medicine, and society. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.